Okay, good morning, everybody. Chris, we're online. We're ready. We're rolling. We're good to go. Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks so much for being here. I think yesterday they had the transit awards in the city hall chambers, but I think we had about 1/3 of the people here. We got maybe 3 times as many, and we're in here. But it's nice because it's a nice full room, and I'm glad everyone is here. I know there's overflow room as well in the Honeywell room. But glad to see everybody here. My staff was joking that they didn't want to see me in the mayor's chair, and I said, "You might be right. You might be right about that." So today at committee, I'm pleased to present the annual Environmental Excellence Awards in recognition of the city employees who have made significant contributions to advance the city's sustainability goals. Welcome to all the nominees who have joined us today for this award presentation. I want to make special mention and welcome the Vice Chair, City Councilors, our City Manager, Wendy Stephenson, senior leaders, the nominators, and a special thanks to Lisa and Lynn, who are the main organizers of the event. Thank you, Lisa and Lynn, for all the work you did today, and thanks everyone for being here. I want to start just by inviting up for the award presentation to give some opening remarks, City Manager Wendy Stephenson to say a few words. Wendy?
I'm just going to pull the mic down a little bit here. But thank you very much, Chairman Art, and good morning to the members of the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Bonjour à tous. And I just want to say, wow, I can't believe how many people are in this room today and just say how incredibly proud I am of everyone. I want to start by welcoming all of our nominees who have demonstrated exceptional leadership and innovation to make our city greener, cleaner, and healthier. There's 15 projects and initiatives that have been nominated this year to showcase staff's creativity, their innovation, expertise in terms of continuous improvement in our city services in the changing landscape that we're facing. And I say we are so proud of these incredible achievements. And it's just absolutely amazing to be here this morning to recognize and celebrate each and every one of you. And I also want to take a moment. I want to acknowledge our general managers who are here and the members of our extended senior leadership team to demonstrate their support of our nominees. So thank you for being here this morning. You know, and as I said, there was an outstanding response to a call for nominations to this year's awards, hundreds of individuals nominated by their peers. And to me, this shows that there is so much great work that's taking place in our city and city staff's commitment to innovation and continuous improvement. And as everyone knows, the city plays such an important role in protecting our environment and encouraging responsible practices within our community. And our efforts to reduce emissions, protect our tree canopy, respond to the impacts of climate change, and make the best possible decisions regarding our buildings and our assets have been enshrined in our strategic plan. And this is one of our 4 areas of focus. And we know that we need to lead by example. Il faut prêcher par l'exemple. And the work of our nominees today proves that we're continuing to make great strides to incorporate environmentally sustainable practices to deliver our essential services to our residents each and every day. And because of your leadership and innovation, we as a city have been able to move forward on our environmental protection and sustainability goals. And I think you all should be very proud of your accomplishments. Vous avez être fiers de ce que vous avez accompli. The work you're doing shows excellent leadership, not only within our organization, but also within our community. And I'm confident that it inspires others to reduce their impact on the environment. And your work is making a real difference, and it's going to benefit our community, both now and in future generations. So thank you all for your extended commitment and dedication to protecting our environment. With that, I'd like to hand it back over to Chairman Art to announce the nominees and the award recipients. Congratulations to all of you. Félicitations et merci beaucoup.
I want to echo Wendy's sentiments about being impressed not only with the number of nominations, but the quality of work we're recognizing today. Going through the selection panel, being on there, it was very hard to pick out folks to win the award because everyone had done such exemplary work. I also found it deeply inspiring to learn more about the great work taking place within our city. I know that others will feel the same. As an elected official who hears from constituents every day, I can say there's a huge appetite for creative and sustainable ways to manage our public land, our waste, our water, and the building and transportation infrastructure that form the bulk of our emissions and the change that's coming for us in the future, which we're all seeing now on the ground almost every single year. So on behalf of council and our residents, thank you to all the nominees for your commitment to environmental stewardship and for your leadership and dedication to building a healthier and more resilient, connected and vibrant city. J'ai le plaisir d'avoir l'occasion de vous remercier au nom de la ville et de nos résidents. Today, we're recognizing efforts in two categories. The first category is internal initiatives, which reduce the city's corporate environmental footprint. The second category is the community category for projects that reduce the overall community footprint. So this year, there are 9 nominated projects in the internal category. These nominees are the 2026 residential curbside collection contract. The environmental benefits of this initiative include a reduction in fuel consumption and a potential reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of up to 3,000 metric tons. The Boys and Girls redevelopment, which restored an underutilized parcel of land to a healthy and usable condition. The Clark Belanger stormwater facility sediment cleanout project, which protected ecological diversity as well as preserving water quality for recreational use. Driving Green, which furthered more sustainable record keeping and a reduction in GHGs produced by city vehicles. The e-bus program, which reduced air pollution, noise pollution, and created a healthier workplace for maintenance staff and mechanics. Electric vehicles and city fleet vehicles, which normalize the use of electric vehicles for internal city business. Establishment pruning pilot project, which increased the resilience of our tree canopy, more effectively captured carbon and diverted excess stormwater. The LED streetlight conversion project, which reduced light pollution, energy consumption, and GHG emissions and saved a lot of money for the city as well. Transportation Master Plan Part 1, which integrates the city's climate vulnerability and risk assessment to realize environmental benefits. So these 9 projects represent the highest levels of expertise, professionalism, and teamwork. I invite all the nominees in the internal category who are here today to please stand or give us a wave. And I ask everyone at committee to join me in a round of applause for your exceptional contributions. I'm pleased to announce the winner of this year's Environmental Excellence Award in the internal category is the LED Streetlight Conversion Project. We want to acknowledge the team behind this exceptional project, which has included Chris Brinkman, Barry Forrester, Jeremy Packard, William Quackenbush, Jordan Ross, JP Rosan, Greg Sargent, and Isaac Wall. The City of Ottawa is one of the first municipalities to take advantage of a new standard that allowed the city to make use of LED right-of-way lighting and to more quickly and more cost-effectively connect automated controls to monitoring and diagnosis of each fixture. The Important Green Initiative replaced more than 58,000 metal halide fixtures with LED lighting and monitoring technology, providing a more consistent light output, prolonged life expectancy, and ensured less downtime for each street light. The environmental benefits of this program include reduced light pollution, reduced energy consumption by 66%, and a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 1,261 metric tons per year for an average annual savings of $6 million. Congratulations to the team, and thank you for your dedication to this multi-year project. And before I ask the winners to join us for a photo, I'd like to make an honorable mention to Scott Lockhart from the Electric Vehicles and City Fleet Vehicles Project for his outstanding efforts. Scott was nominated for his leadership in championing the use of electric vehicles, promoting the installation of electric vehicles, charging stations at city facilities, and offering training and logistics support to staff. That dedication to use the low carbon vehicles has resulted in Building Code Services operating a fleet of 35 hybrid electric cars and hybrid/electric cars, and influenced staff behavior outside of work with 100% of BCS staff using fleet electric vehicles, confirming that they would look for an electric vehicle for personal use. So thank you as well to those runner-ups. I'd now like to invite the LED streetlight conversion project and the vice chair, if you'll come up, vice chair members who are here today, to please join us for the certificate presentation and photo. In fact, if any committee members here want to come up, feel free to come up with us as well for the photo. Come on up. So we'll do a quick photo with the team, the LED streetlight conversion team. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, there you guys are photo oping too, eh? Okay.
We're gonna do 2 rows. They gotta go in front.
Okay.
Gotta go in front. Okay.
I'm actually one of the tallest women on council, which is really bizarre because I've been short my whole life. Who's taller than you? Stephanie, that's it. Look, it's very strange. Because I'm not, I'm not a tall
This is
person.
the worst. Whenever. Oh, we gotta do 2 rows.
I get your always at the back, right?
Okay, thanks so much. Congratulations. Okay, now we're moving on to the community category. The nominees for the community category include the Better Buildings Ottawa Benchmark Program, which mandates building owners of buildings over a certain size to measure and report their performance data on energy use, water use, and GHG emissions. The Expanded Recycling in Parks Program, which led to the diversion of 79% of organic material and 75% of recyclable material from city landfills. The Hydrant Drinking Fountain Pilot Project, which provides 1,500 liters of clean drinking water and diverted 2,500 single-use plastic bottles from landfills. The Public Bike Parking Strategy to make it easier and safer to bike around the city, which reduces the use of fossil fuels and emissions. Rain Ready Ottawa, which has reduced runoff into the Ottawa River watershed and helped prevent erosion. And updates to the use and care of roads bylaw, which encourages naturalization of public space and biodiversity. Before we announce this year's winner, I just want to invite all the nominees of that category who are present to please just stand or give us a wave if you can't stand. Thanks very much. Give a round of applause. Thanks so much for your contributions. It's now my pleasure to announce the 2023 Environmental Excellence Award winner in the community category. I just want to make sure. Yes. Woo! The winner is Rain Ready Ottawa. So congratulations to the team, Sherazad Garabaji, Amanda Lynch, Connor Renouf, Julia Robinson, Chris Rogers, Rick Scabaloni, and Barbara St. Aubin. Rain Ready Ottawa is a pilot program that supports property owners in managing stormwater on their property. Early in the pilot, the demand for home assessments outstripped capacity. As a result, the team developed and launched a series of online e-learning modules where residents could learn more about stormwater issues and solutions they could install at their own homes. Rain Ready Ottawa also partnered with Landscape Ontario to offer local companies training in fusion landscape design. This innovative approach to landscape design combines the science of hydrology with the art of horticulture, equipping local businesses with the knowledge and skills to design landscape for clients with on-site stormwater management as a guiding principle. This environmental education project is a great example of multiple partners working together for the benefit of the community. By incentivizing the stormwater management retrofits through rebates, Rain Ready Ottawa is taking a cost-efficient approach to retrofitting Ottawa to be more resilient in the face of increasing rainfall frequencies and amounts, which we're seeing more of every single year. The environmental benefits of this initiative include reducing runoff into the Ottawa River watershed, preventing erosion, maintaining healthy and clean habitats, and helping property owners build resilience while mitigating the effects of climate change. So congratulations to the Rain Ready Ottawa team. I want to make honorable mention to, it was a tough competition scoring this internally. So I want to make honorable mention as well to the Better Buildings Ottawa Benchmark Program team. You were nominated for supporting owners of large buildings to decrease energy consumption. The team has provided benchmark reports detailing current energy consumption and invites program participants to workshops with external partners to explore best practices and funding opportunities. And the environmental benefits of this program include an overall reduction in energy consumption by program participants and fewer greenhouse gas emissions. And I just want to thank you all for your work as well. Now I invite the Rain Ready Ottawa team and again, all members of council and the vice chair to please join us for the certificate presentation. Thanks. Someone get a
Well, I also have heels on for once in my life, but I am. Jessica and Stephanie are taller than me, but I don't think any of the other women are. And I'm not that tall, but I thought it was terrible. Way to go, Connor.
Well, on behalf of my council colleagues, the city manager and the city leadership team, I just want to say how much we appreciate all the work that all of you have done in this room. It's more important ever to focus on reducing our environmental footprint and adapting the city for what's coming our way. One last thing before we conclude, I would like to invite all the nominees and their nominators and leaders to head down to the Honeywell boardroom just down the hall here to connect with your fellow nominees, grab a cup of coffee, and you can also collect your individual certificates. So thanks so much for being here and enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, so we're going to get started and we'll start with the roll call, please, Mr. Clerk.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Luloff.
Present.
Vice Chair Carr.
Present.
And Chair Menard.
Here.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Tierney's office has advised that he's unable to attend today's meeting. So we had our ceremonial presentation. I want to recognize that the meeting is taking place on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory today. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, seeing none. Confirmation of minutes. Can we confirm the minutes from Tuesday, the 21st November, 2023? Confirmed. Thank you very much. Response to inquiries. I understand there is a request to lift at least one of these inquiries. Councillor Hill, did you want to?
Yeah, if
lift
I
a-
can, if I could hold 4.1 and 4.3, please.
Okay, so with the will of committee, can we lift those two inquiries onto today's agenda?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much. I understand there might be a delegation as well that wants to speak to one of these, so that's timely. We'll consider those inquiries at the end of the meeting after the other business on the committee agenda. The next is the urban flood information report. We've got one speaker for this item and no additional correspondence. There'll be a staff presentation, so we'll hold that item. The financial statements for in-house solid waste collection, external audit results. We don't have a staff presentation and receive no correspondence, no delegations. Can we carry this item? Carried. Thank you. Status update, Environment and Climate Change Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending March 8th, 2024. Again, we have no speakers for this item and no submissions. Is the report received? Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so we'll move back then to the urban flood information report. We've got one speaker for that item, and then we'll start with a staff presentation first. So I'll just invite staff to come up and provide their presentation before we get to the delegation.
Thank you and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of the work that Infrastructure and Water Services is doing to address urban flooding. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président et les membres du comité. Je vous remercie de nous avoir accordé l'occasion de vous faire part de quelques-uns des travaux menés par notre département pour lutter contre les inondations urbaines. In October of last year, Council carried a motion by Councillor Carr with regards to the city's response to urban flooding. In those discussions, I identified the need to provide an information report to committee and council to outline the continuous efforts that the city is making to mitigate flooding and how all works together to achieve resilience. For Infrastructure and Water Services, urban flooding has been a focus for decades, and today's presentation will show how we have built continuous improvement in everything we do. There is always work that can be done. We are always looking to build flood resilience and mitigate impacts to our residents and business owners. Our top priorities continue to be about protecting the natural environment, public safety, and ensuring sustainable infrastructure. Today with me, I have the Director and Associate Director for Water Linear and Customer Services, all the way to my right, Marilyn Jeannot and Tyler Hicks. And we also have Haran Sandanayake, the Manager of Water Resources Planning and Engineering. I will now turn it over to Haran to kick off our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. Next slide, please. What is urban flooding? Urban flooding is one of the two major types of flooding experienced in Ottawa. The second type is riverine flooding, which occurs when a river overflows its banks and may impact homes and infrastructure in the floodplain. Rivers may flood, as we all know, in the spring during melt or during prolonged rain events. Urban flooding is the subject of today's presentation. Urban flooding occurs in built-up urban and rural areas when damage occurs due to water entering buildings. It is a direct result of rainfall and is affected by the intensity and duration of the rain event. It's also affected by topography and the size of storm and sanitary sewer pipes. Climate change, as we know, and a growing number of extreme weather events also significantly impact the city. There are two major types of urban flooding. Overland flooding, where runoff flows over surfaces like streets, yards, and during a significant rainfall event can result in water entering homes through window wells and foundation cracks, etc. And there's storm or sanitary flooding that occurs when runoff backs up in basements, often due to sewer system surcharges that occur when the pipe capacity is exceeded. It's important to note that water that accumulates in the street, however, during large rain events is normal. Streets provide storage capacity for rainfall that is then able to slowly enter into the stormwater collection system and help prevent potential backups into homes. Next slide, please. The system created to manage runoff and drainage has many components that are all integrated. All of the components, topography, geography, private property infrastructure, and municipal infrastructure are connected together. They work together during rainfall events. This means that none of these components are sufficient on their own. However, none can be ignored either. They all play their part and contribute to flood resilience. The City of Ottawa staff have been, are now, and continue to be committed to the continual improvement of the municipal components of the system. Next slide, please. Just as the drainage system is a connected system with many parts, so too is the toolkit of strategies that the City of Ottawa employs to build and increase flood resilience. The 6 items on this slide work together to create flood resilience. Just like the components of the drainage system, each tool in the toolkit has a specific role. And this means, again, that none of these tools are sufficient on their own. However, none can be ignored either. They all play their part and contribute to flood resilience. And once again, the City of Ottawa staff have been, are now, and will continue to be committed to the continual improvement of all of these tools in the toolkit. The following slides describe these tools in more detail. Next slide, please. The first tool is planning and strategy. There are many aspects of planning for and strategizing improvements to flood resilience. Plans and strategies are required because of several factors such as growth and affordable housing, financial planning, climate change, renewal of infrastructure at the end of its life, and other opportunities to improve the system for flood resilience. It is important that planning not be completed in a piecemeal fashion. Rather, the City of Ottawa uses both a systems level view and a long-term view in these plans and strategies to inform how best to use the other tools in the toolkit. Next slide, please. Community design is the next tool. It creates those elements of the drainage system that cannot easily be changed or easily improved in the future. Neighborhoods and their systems are designed and built to the standards of the day. For decades, the city has been finding ways to build resilience in communities of various ages with large-scale infrastructure renewal, local infrastructure improvements, and support for private property protection measures. Depending on the age of your neighborhood, it may have been built before modern principles of surface runoff management were the standard of the day. In these neighborhoods, the key design focus was the size of the sewer or the ditch. Newer neighborhoods, starting sometime in the 1990s, do consider surface runoff management. We now plan for home elevations, driveway elevations, road widths, road slopes, surface flow paths to manage runoff in extreme events. In addition, of course, to the traditional sewer sizing and ditch sizing. It's important to note that there is no stormwater system that will have capacity for every extreme event, which leads us to the next tool in the toolkit. Next slide, please. Risk assessment and mitigation programming. The City of Ottawa already uses a sophisticated suite of tools and techniques to identify and quantify risks. Risk assessment is a critical component that enables the design and implementation of mitigation measures. Effective flood mitigation measures do not only include the ones I mentioned, local infrastructure improvements, large-scale programs like Glencairn, or infrastructure projects like Sandy Hill Storage Tank. It also includes very effective, low-cost, and quick-to-implement solutions such as backwater valves in homes or inlet control devices in our catch basins. These measures are very important as well, and they work together with the larger measures for a wide range of rainfall events, which means they're effective in a wide range of rainfall events. I'll now turn the presentation over to Tyler, who will describe the remaining tools in the flood resilience toolkit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Next slide, please. The proper function of our city's sanitary and stormwater system relies on extensive operations and maintenance program. Our comprehensive preventive maintenance measures include regular inspections of all sanitary, combined, and storm sewers. Additionally, a proactive cleaning of sewers, catch basins, and hotspot cleaning saw over 2,000 work orders completed last year. Furthermore, our ongoing sewer repair program addresses identified issues promptly, with nearly 5,000 repair locations tended to in 2023. Our team also operates, monitors, and cleans over 100 stormwater management locations to ensure that water has a place to drain without adversely affecting the environment. With dedicated teams available at all times, we swiftly respond to problems and provide support for our residents. Next slide, please. Most of what we've been talking about today are the actions that the city is taking to prevent flooding, but it's important to note that residents can take actions to help ensure their property can withstand extreme rainfall events. There are simple and more complex actions that residents can take. For those more complex actions, the city has programs available to support residents. The Residential Protective Plumbing Program provides financial assistance for the installation of sump pumps and backwater valves, which prevents water from entering basements when sewers are surcharged. We are working on making improvements to this program by streamlining the application process and raising awareness of the program to ensure that the residents who can most benefit are able to take advantage of this program. The Rain Ready program helps property owners find better ways to manage rainfall on their property. While this program is not specifically geared to preventing flooding, improving drainage on private property does help move water away from homes and helps the system as a whole. Some of the simple actions that residents can take to get ready for rain include regularly cleaning out eaves troughs, keeping culverts clear, cleaning out backwater valves, and testing sump pumps. The city also supports residents that are affected by frequent flooding. Eligible property owners can apply for their support through the Compassionate Grant Program. This program was introduced in 2009, but is now rarely used. Major changes are being considered, and recommendations will be brought for committee later this year. Next slide, please. We recognize how difficult an extreme rainfall event can be for the people affected. When rainfall exceeds the limits of the stormwater system, there's little that the city can do to stop the flow of water into properties, but we can learn from flooding events. Currently, we gather data, conduct thorough analysis and review of the information collected, identify root causes of flooding, and conduct detailed investigations to develop solutions to address the causes of flooding. With this information, we can make improvements that can increase the resiliency of local systems. Using the information gathered from the August 10th, 2023 extreme rainfall event, we will be implementing small local improvements while conducting more detailed investigations to identify further short and long-term solutions. We are also making improvements to how we support residents who are affected by flooding by providing timely information on what steps they can take after a flood. We are developing communication tools to help support residents before, during, and after rainfall events. This will include improving the flood reporting process, including by allowing residents to report flooding using tools on the city's website. Next slide, please. Using the previously mentioned plans, studies, risk assessments, and information from real-life events, we develop projects large and small to continually improve drainage in Ottawa. The focus is doing the right thing at the right time for the right cost. Over the last 4 decades, Council has invested $340 million on large projects such as the Sandy Hill Storage Tank, Combined Sewage Storage Tunnel, West End Flood Mitigation, Orleans Flood Mitigation, and Preston Street Combined Sewer Upgrades. Smaller local improvements have also been undertaken to separate combined sewer systems, increase pipe sizing, upgrade catch basins, and add inlet control devices. Many of these improvements are conducted in tandem with integrated road renewal projects, since this is the most cost-effective time to make these upgrades. Next slide, please. As you can see, urban flooding has many complexities, which city staff are continuously working on to better understand and mitigate. The city has built a toolkit with a suite of tools to increase flood resilience in neighborhoods, with differing ages and with different challenges. The city is committed to continue our efforts to make improvements and investments to city infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. We do have one delegation, and it is Erica Shardlow with cafes. Erica, if you can come up if you're here or online.
Hi.
Hi, Erica. We can hear you, and you've got 5 minutes and your PowerPoint is ready to go.
Okay, wonderful. Well, first off, thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Erica Shardlow, and I'm a program coordinator at Cafes Ottawa, and I'll be speaking for a few minutes on urban flooding. Next slide, please. So about cafes, cafes stands for Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability. We were founded in 2010, and we are a network of local environmental leaders that includes over 200 representatives from urban, suburban, and rural areas. Next slide. So this is just a quick overview of the presentations. We can go to the next slide, please. So I want to start off by saying that it is really good to see that the city's urban flood information report clearly acknowledges climate change, and that by the 2050s, we can expect that wet days will be wetter, with a 15% increase in the precipitation that falls in one day, an 8% increase in the total precipitation or freezing rain, with the top risks being flooding and flooding damage. Next slide. So urban flooding is the leading cause of preventable damage to homes, with costly basement flooding often a result. So plans to manage extreme rainfall should ideally include actions from municipal infrastructure, but also integrate city incentives with insurance practices and involve property owners. Next slide. So in 2023, cafes explored community resilience through our climate dialogues. And from these, we know that residents are concerned. People are expecting new infrastructure, new building codes, new development standards. And currently, resilience is quite low. Communities are typically not prepared or informed. And we're finding people need more clarity on who is responsible and who pays for these flooding investments. Next slide. So we have been listening and learning a lot from residents at the coffee houses on sustainability dialogues that have been happening in the Glebe. So on June 8th, the theme will be on basement flooding, and everyone is invited to come out to these dialogues. They're really great. Just bring your own coffee cup. Next slide. So Cafes has also partnered with the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, and we also plan to chat with the Insurance Bureau of Canada on March 27th at our public keynote event. Next slide. So from these things, we have found that there needs to be better and more public information available. Like I was saying, people generally don't know what kind of supports exist, like for example, backwater belt grants. So would detailed hazard mapping and historical flooding information help to prepare for flooding risks? Hazard mapping for residential areas is typically not available to the public or homeowners. So should this be part of a resiliency checklist or a residential resiliency rating? We need to connect housing affordability to climate resilience and consider what is happening with costs of home insurance coverage. Like, can we connect the protective plumbing program incentives to insurance offerings? Next slide. So in terms of what other cities are doing, 30 municipalities are providing basement flooding prevention subsidies. So a review of Ottawa's protective plumbing program is definitely timely, and we believe residents should be consulted, which is something that cafes can help with. Next slide. So many green engineered investments like tree trenches are being installed by cities like Vancouver and Toronto for stormwater management. Tree trenches reduce the burden on drain pipes, and research shows they are really effective even during major rain events. And we think this would be a great cost-effective opportunity that also enhances livability. Next slide. So our recommendations are to consult with the community and match best practice in the revamp of the protective plumbing program. Green on-site stormwater absorption is definitely needed and cheaper than gray infrastructure capital projects, and we need to find a source of funds for this. And lastly, we need more work and analysis on community incentives, especially how to engage the insurance sector to make that link between homeowner investments and lower rates and higher coverage. So if you go to the next slide, that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Erica. I'm not seeing questions, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the work that Cafes is doing with those coffee houses and educating people and partnering where possible with the city to educate and also ensure that residents have access to the resources that the city does have, but may not know about them. So really appreciate your presentation today. It helps us with the urban and rural flooding. And hopefully we can connect soon on some of those coffee houses. You said that next one was June 8th. Is that where it was?
Yes, actually, the next one is coming this Sunday, and the focus will be on green space and trees. But yes, the June 8th will be on basement flooding.
Fantastic. And it's in Alta Vista, a good place to have it, given the urban flooding that has happened there. So thanks very much for being here again.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move now to questions from committee members for staff, and Vice Chair Carr is up first.
Hi, thanks very much for the report. Thank you for the update. I know I've been working closely with staff since August 10th when we had record rainfall come into the community. And the need to revisit our programs, program delivery, and communication to residents was evident after that. To me, as a first-time councillor dealing with massive flooding in the area, of 486 reported floods across the city, 180 of them, are roughly 38%, were recorded in my ward. I found that there was a lot of confusion about roles with the homeowner. What is the city's responsibility? What is the private homeowner's responsibility? And because our sewer system was built to the standard of the time, there was a lot of education that is needed amongst residents. I could really see the devastating impacts in the community with respect to people who lost a lot of their belongings, people who have lost their insurance because of repeated floods and no longer qualify for insurance. There was a significant loss of housing in one area. It's an area where a lot of people had basement apartments, and we lost a lot of housing, and in some cases affordable housing. So the implications are severe. And I appreciate the attention that the teams have paid to this and have showed me some of the new, Tyler recently showed me one of the new communication tools that has just been released, and I have been getting updated regularly. Just a few questions. One of the big things was that the residential protective plumbing program and the compassionate grant program, we talked about this, are sort of insufficient with they're burdensome and insufficient. You mentioned that there would be updates being made to the program. Can you walk me through a little bit on how community engagement will happen on those programs? Will they be released as a report to council and then just have, the statutory timeframes to come and make a delegation? Or will this be proposals that are done through Engage Ottawa? If we can talk a little bit about how that community engagement on those changes will happen.
Yes, thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, we haven't finalized our communication strategy for the protective plumbing program. One of the difficulties we run into with this program is it's hard to get feedback when there's a lack of awareness. So we feel there's a need to raise awareness, and we have reached out to some of the customers that have used it. And certainly the message that we've received already is that it needs to be simplified, it needs to be streamlined, and it needs to be more readily available. And we're really hoping to focus on awareness and raising that awareness to get the feedback on what the right tools are for residents to be able to use, and really making sure that residents are aware of what the most appropriate measures for their own individual situation is. Because as we discussed today, the causes of flooding can be complex, and although in a community it might be relatively similar, that protective measures in one area might work in that area, it might not match as much in a different location in the city.
Yeah, perfect. And I certainly think we clearly saw the geographical differences across wards, across a city that's 2,800 square feet, where there needs to be attention paid in certain areas. One of the programs that exists, and I don't know if anyone on the panel here is here to speak to it, but Rain Ready Ottawa, most of my ward has not been eligible for that program to date, and yet I have the most flooding. Is anyone here to be able to speak about changes that are coming to Rain Ready Ottawa? I don't see Connor, but someone else. Because I think that's a really important program if we have something in place and then one of the areas most impacted hasn't been eligible.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So Rain Ready Ottawa the program is going through review right now. We're ending the pilot phase. And so we're expecting a report to come forward to committee and council in April is the planned date or shortly thereafter. And that review examines the effectiveness of the program. It also looks at a question of whether and how staff recommend expanding, what the options are for expanding the reach of the program to align very specifically with the goals of the program, which is specifically looking at impacts on local watercourses. So that report is expected to be coming in the next couple of months. And as part of that, we did do extensive engagement, both in terms of participants who have been part of the program, but also public engagement.
Thanks very much. And I look forward to that and as well seeing the revised residential protective program, plumbing program, and the compassionate grant program and anything else. I'll turn it over to someone else to ask questions, Chair. But from my vantage point as the councillor for Alta Vista Ward that had a record amount of floods in the city, I think investments that we need to make in climate resiliency are absolutely critical. In 2017, we also had what was called a 100-year flood that had very damaging impacts on my neighborhood. And 6 years later, we had another 100-year flood. Climate change is here, and we can see it in the extreme weather events. And I appreciate all the attention staff have paid to this issue.
Thanks, Vice Chair Carr, and thanks for your leadership on the motions you've passed. And I'm looking forward to that report back. I know there's lots of questions from committee members still. Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This will reinforce, I think, what Councillor Carr was speaking to in terms of our concerns about the future trend line on urban flooding and such. Just a couple questions. Mostly of them are actually asking about how we're looking at making investments that I think can perhaps have some positive impact. I heard at a previous Environment Committee meeting where we were talking on a similar topic about leveraging parks as drainage sites. And I just wanted to ask, is that part of our integrated strategy whereby we're trying to, establish new parks and park systems that are, below the water line or what have you, or places where they can act as a temporary flood control measure or a stormwater sewer type in extremis containing system?
Thank you, Chair. Generally speaking, no. Parks and drainage, we're trying to keep the parks dry. That doesn't mean that in specific instances that it hasn't been considered. We've had discussions with developers on precisely that. The issue from a purely a water resources perspective on how drainage can be impacted by parks is the park has to be in the right place to have a benefit. So just one example, near where I live, Grasshopper Hill Park, it's a hill, it's the beginning of the drainage area, and it has a lot of pervious area. Doing a lot of improvement in that park is not going to have any significant impact on the flooding that's experienced downstream, but parks in other places that are in the right location can have a big impact. And these are the sorts of things that we would look at. After August 10th flooding, we have looked at the areas that have flooded, and where there are parks, we are looking at what can be done in the sort of vein that you mentioned. Are there things that could be done that could help drainage within and outside the park?
No, thanks for that. We heard from the delegation previously about the idea of tree trenches. Is that something that the city's looking at?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely sure the extent to which we're looking at that. I could come back to you with that answer. I will just say that tree trenches, just like many other stormwater management techniques, are generally on the table. We have to, just like which was said before, it has to align with the goal. And if and tree trenches, just like many other technologies, don't only have a drainage impact, they could have many other benefits as well. But I don't know to the right now to the extent that that it's integrated into our right-of-way management.
And just
programs.
mentioned too before, Councillor Hill, handing it back to you, there are some pilot projects going on with tree trench-like technology to gather that stormwater to both feed that tree and to take it off the roadway in some areas. So I know city staff have started that work, and some pilots are underway now. Hopefully we'll see that more and more on our main streets as an example. Back to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Similarly, I know that there are some advances in technology in terms of aggregate and hard surfaces. Is this something that we're investigating in terms of vulnerable locations or areas like parking lots that are in low-lying areas whereby you know, some of those hard surfaces, instead of pushing all of that water to the outsides, that it can actually absorb some of that water as well?
Thank you, Chair. I am aware of certain cases where that's exactly what we're doing, where city owns facilities like community centers. And when they come up for renewal, we are looking at innovative stormwater management techniques in those sites. In addition, I'm not sure if the question was specifically for city facilities, but we're working on low impact development guidelines. I know the province is going to be, sounds like they're going to be coming up with the provincial guidelines as well. So there's a lot of movement in this space for sure.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for those questions, Councillor Hill. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is perfect timing. So I was just about to say, it's great that so much of this presentation was on reactive things. We have to do that, you know, because so much of our city is already built. But in terms of being proactive, I'm just wondering how much staff are giving feedback to. And so everyone, if you're not aware of this, that MPP Karen McCrimmon has put forward Bill 168 in the legislature on, and it's called the Storm Water Flood Prevention Act of 2024. And it's looking at upgrading and renewing the standards that had been looked at about 15 or, well, I don't know how many years ago, but former provincial government looked at upgrading the standards for low impact development. And then since then, nothing has happened. So the bill is making its way through the legislature. And I just want to ask staff, are they giving feedback to that bill?
Thank you, Chair. That was actually the provincial document that I was referring to. This is a document that, as has been mentioned, has been in the works for quite a while, and we were actively engaged in that process in the development of the guidelines, in responding to the province's consultant and working with a large range of municipal stakeholders. With that information, even though the guidelines have not been technically released, we have that information that's informed our development of our own guidelines as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, what I understand from the engineers, you know, in Canada, we're always talking about stormwater. The engineers tell me that what we do is we add on 20% to a 100-year flood. Is that what you're talking about? We do, because what this bill 168 is going to do is upgrade the standards so that, and I don't know that it would be exactly just 20% in addition to 100-year numbers.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies. I should have been clearer. When I referred to our guidelines, I was referring to our upcoming guidelines on low impact development, so they're not complete yet. With regards to the 20%, there's a few aspects here. We are looking at our design guidelines for elements of the stormwater management system where we wouldn't necessarily apply 20%. The 20% is a stress test, so we look at 100-year plus 20% to see if when the developer is designing a new neighborhood, whether there is water coming into the building. And we will be reviewing that as well, but it's not quite the same as saying we're adding 20% to, let's say, the size of all infrastructure. It's a stress test approach, which may not sound the same, but it's actually more robust because we're looking at the whole system. What I mentioned in the presentation is we have a systems view when designing new communities, and this is the aspect of systems view. So it's the 20% is it sounds like we're just adding 20%, but it's actually a stress test for an extreme event and seeing how the whole system behaves. With that said, we are reviewing our guidelines subsequent to any recommendations coming out of the climate resiliency strategy.
Okay, and you will be following this bill 168 as it makes its way through the legislature.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councillor Kavanaugh for questions next.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And thank you for the report. Flooding is top of mind in Bay Ward after incidents of the past, but this is urban flooding, and I realize the distinction. And it's also top of mind. It's an area where there's a lot of intensification happening due to the LRT coming in, stage 2. And it's a weird mix of old style housing and neighborhoods which had ditches. And yet we're going to have intensification in those areas. And the ditches have been kind of neglected for a long time. And I think they are an important part of the system for urban flooding. And are we going to be proactive of bringing them back to life? Because it's been something that has been forgotten. And I know we're going to have a subcommittee on ditches. Very exciting. But I just want to talk about ditches because it is a concern. And it's right in the areas that are being targeted for intensification, such as Wood Park and Queens Bay Terrace North, for example. The other concern is loss of housing, or sorry, loss of trees, pardon me. Because trees obviously hold water. And as we intensify, we will see tree loss. We have seen tree loss. And that's the first thing people notice is when there's infill and there's tree loss, they see concerns about flooding. And I just want to know about the balancing act of making sure we have those tree canopies to help with preventing flooding.
Thank you, Chair. I could speak to perhaps the first two points. One was about a mention of intensification. As may be already known, the infrastructure master plan is coming forward this year, and 2 specific programs were designed brand new to deal with stormwater management, flooding, and intensification. So that will be coming later this year. With regards to ditches, the statement in my estimation is absolutely correct. Ditches are an important part of the stormwater drainage system. They are infrastructure just like storm sewers. They often have they have the same level of service, but often actually a better level of service than sewers when they are in good condition. And just like storm sewers, they have a life cycle and they need to be restored. In the case of storm sewers, it's replaced, but in the case of ditches, restored at the end of their life. And yes, there are programs to review all right-of-ways for at the end of their life cycle. We are working on a number of neighborhoods right now.
Thank you. I appreciate it because as we go through secondary plans, for example, we were doing one on Lincoln Fields, and one of the issues that's used as, well, we can't do intensification because of urban flooding. We do need more information available for residents on how we're tackling that, because we can't, they're asking these questions and we have to show it's not an afterthought. It's something that has been planned in, because it's a very concerning issue, because it's part of the reason that we need to have an overall system. And I appreciate it'll probably be in the infrastructure report. But just letting you know that that's top of mind right now. And in terms of tree loss, trees are not mentioned a lot in here, but how are we tackling that? And I see a person who can answer that. Thanks, Martha. Sorry to make you come all the way down.
Thank you so much, through you, Chair. Thanks for the question. Well, as you know, we have our urban forest management plan that we're actively implementing, and the big focus for this term of council is our tree planting strategy for the city. And so what we're going to be doing through that is looking at what we are doing for tree planting right now, what tree planting programs we have, and where basically looking at our canopy cover data and understanding where trees are really needed the most, where we're missing, where the plantable space is, where we're missing canopy cover, so our low canopy cover areas, and looking at creating new programming, expanding our programming to address to ensure that we're getting trees planted in the areas that are needed the most. And so these are the kinds of things that we'll be thinking about through that analysis. We're working quite closely with Haran's group on several items related to on-site stormwater management and that kind of thing, and understanding the impact on trees. And we're planning to basically launch the tree planting strategy quite soon, and we're hoping to have some early action items coming back to this committee with respect to new tree planting programs this year. So
That's helpful. And I hope we're going to continue to have a hard line on retaining older trees, not just tree planting. We started that with the tree bylaw, and we've seen some success, but I still am concerned about that with intensification infill.
yeah, so we obviously are still implementing the tree bylaw, and we feel that it's going quite well. I mean, I think we're about 3 years into the new tree bylaw now. And as you know, we were focused on the protection of existing trees during infill development. And we've been able to basically integrate our forestry and planning forestry staff into the earliest stages of development at all levels. So from building permits to committee of through other developments as well. And I mean, you know, to be clear, there is a conflict between development and trees, and we're not always going to be able to save all trees on all sites, but we are definitely seeing an uptick in being able to have a lot more retention and protection over time than we were before the new tree bylaw came into effect because of that early consideration of trees.
Thank you. And I know it's important because it takes, 100 years for that tree to get that big. And tree planting is great, but it's trying to find ways to protect those older trees in these areas. Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll just have one more question, and that is about funding. I worry about if there's a backlog of funding needed for the infrastructure crowd, and I guess we're going to hear about that later. But I'm concerned that that it's piling up because it's getting more expensive to do infrastructure and to do updating of our system. It's not very sexy. It's something we see. It's underground. We don't see it, but it's really, really necessary. And how are we doing in terms of funding for these projects?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. As some members of the committee may be aware, there are provincial regulations around asset management plans that are required for all different asset classes, including stormwater, water, wastewater, transportation. And so in 2025 is when we bring the asset management reports, which also includes not only a 10-year projection, but also an understanding of to what level of service, to what level of condition do we want to maintain the assets, and the level of investments that would be required for that. So that will be, I think, a critical discussion for committee and council in 2025. And so this is where all of this will come together. So it'll be a holistic view of all of the assets that are paid for either by rate funding or tax funding. And then we can have that wholesome kind of discussion and decision on what it is that's important and where to prioritize the funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. As with my colleagues, I'm certainly very enthused to have this critical conversation and to continue having this critical conversation. It was interesting that today's presentation started with a quote from the city manager, and I'm paraphrasing her quote, but something to the effect of, as everyone knows, the city plays such a huge role in helping us meet our climate goals. And with that acknowledgement comes a certain level of responsibility. And I also appreciate, speaking of responsibility, that the delegation from cafes made reference to the climate change master plan, where the city continuously and legitimately is repeating the statement that we can and should expect an increase of these high level floods. And with that acknowledgement, I think we are communicating not just the responsibility on residents, but we're communicating our responsibility as a city as well. If we are saying to our residents, you should expect calamity and disaster year after year, to a certain extent, we have to show how we are living up to that acknowledgement. And of course, that always comes, I look forward to, in our budgets. I also find it every time I hear the term 100-year flood, 100-year flood, we're kidding ourselves with the term 100-year flood. We should take a zero off that. It's a 1 in 10-year flood, a 1 in 5-year flood. So the more we keep on thinking that, climate change calamity is way off in the future, we are ostriches with our heads in the sand. And I think we have to change everything about the way we budget to recognize that. We talk about budgeting, as if it's a household budget. And certainly in a household budget, you speak to, like I tell my kids every day, no, you can't have that. That's a nice to have. That's a want. We only have limited money. We can only fund our needs. Based on the reports I hear from my residents about devastating impact, not only to their property, but to their quality of life, I am hearing of devastation, that these must be seen as needs, and our budget needs to reflect these being seen as needs. There's a city administrator in Manitoba that I met who continuously makes an impression on me, where he says quite clearly, every single dollar spent on infrastructure can and must be seen as a dollar spent on building climate resilience. Every single dollar we spend. And that's not only on infrastructure, that's on something as simple as public works street maintenance. It's great that we can tell our residents, please be sure to clear your catch basin, go out there and clear your catch basin. But if we can double or triple the amount of times that we send our trucks around to clean up debris, that might have a similar impact. I can't tell you on August 10th how many times I saw residents up to their knees raking away leaves. I'm grateful they did it, but if we'd only had the budget to send out a street sweeping truck, maybe once a week before, we might not have had that calamity. So speaking of calamity, I share my colleague, Councillor Carr's concerns that her ward certainly was one of the hardest hit in the August 10th flood, my ward as well. Ward 9, again, for reasons yet to be clearly known, probably because it's an older established ward with infrastructure that certainly can bear some upgrades and maintenance. Whether it's hit by wind or hit by water, we're sorely hit. I very much appreciated the report we got from Eric Toussignan detailing the impact across the city. And then he zeroed in on Ward 9 and he told me the areas that were hit. And I noticed in that report, he identified pockets of Ward 9 that were quite hit. And based on our own preliminary investigation post August 10th, I said, oh, it seems to be missing a few areas there. So we quickly launched a Google survey to our residents. We put it out a month or so ago. Within a day of putting it out, we got 50, 60 responses right away, clearly identifying patterns of flooding disaster. And we were clear to ask, was your flooding only on August 10th, or do you have patterns of flooding? Because we wanted to see what kind of patterns are emerging. And certainly there are patterns emerging. And I'm leading to a question, pardon my long-winded rant here. But those patterns indicated clear addresses. We asked for postal codes and you put them up on a map and boom, there's a nice little red spot there. And so my first question, when it comes to the programs we have, whether it's the residential protective, forget the term, the residential, you know what it is, the Residential Protective Plumbing Program or the Compassionate Grant Program or the Rain Ready Ottawa program. Do we have the capacity? Because I think that we should be increasing our educational, promotional, and incentivization campaigns for that. But these are not necessarily universally required programs. There are areas of the city that are hit harder than others. So do we have the capacity, whether through our social media advertising or other forms, of zeroing in on which residents should be getting this Facebook message far more often than others? So that's my first question. Do we do geographically targeted advertising for these preventative measures based on our own data and mine? I can share my Google link of where the hotspots are.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chair. The short answer is not yet. And I think it is absolutely critical that we focus on those residents that can most benefit from the programs and that we may raise awareness and raise marketing of the programs that we have to the people that can most benefit from it. That is certainly within our plans. We're happy to work with you and I'd be very interested to hear the information that you have gathered so far to make sure that we can really reach the residents that can most benefit from these programs. And that is something we're committed to doing within our updates of the program.
and I will certainly share my info with you. Can I just ask a follow-up to that question? When you're saying not yet, does that mean not yet we have means of doing targeted advertising campaign for these programs, or not yet the city does not yet have the capacity for doing targeted advertising? Like my election campaign, anybody can do targeted Facebook advertising, you know, oh, you like plums over here, there's that ad. You like plums, what the heck? Anybody, my kid can do targeted Facebook ads. So do we have the capacity as the city to do targeted advertising campaigns based on need?
Yes, thank you for the question. We will work closely with our communications group to ensure that we can make those targeted and focused advertisements. We've also heard from other residents that social media is a great way to advertise, but it's not necessarily the only means and not the only way that people are receiving this message. So we're working to get to all residents in whatever ways we can, and really focusing on the areas that can most benefit from the programs.
Councillor Devine, your time is up.
I'll get back on after.
You get back on. That'd
Thank
be
you.
Great. There's only 2 other members that want to speak, so I imagine you'll be on very soon.
I need time to catch my breath anyways.
Okay, thank you very much. Good questions. And Councillor Brockington, you're up next.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to staff for this the follow-up report today. It's appreciated. As many people know, River Ward had their share of impacts on August 10th as well, and it's quite distressing to have seen the impact on so many residents across the ward. One issue that I have raised with staff already is just how people report flooding. So I know in Alta Vista, I think there was a piloted survey or a targeted survey that people could fill out and provide details to staff, which I think was very good at getting information. But even after the River Ward specific report was issued just a few months ago, and people received that report, they said, I've never reported. I have not yet reported to the city. So I do think that the impact within my own ward was underreported, but I do think staff has a good handle on where the flooding incidents occurred and where infrastructure needs to be looked at. There are a number of residents who have reported to me that their insurance coverage was light in the grand scheme of things, meaning they're stuck with a bill of $50,000, $60,000 to remediate their basements in particular, that their insurance is contributing just a fraction of the total cost. And so I'm wondering if to staff, if there's an opportunity here to share our thoughts on the types of coverage homeowners should be acquiring, whether they need additional coverage. Like, how do people protect themselves so that they don't get stuck with a $50,000 bill at the end of the day? They're widows who literally don't have the money to do this, whose homes today are still in disrepair and they don't know what to do because they don't have the money. So I just want to park that with staff, because I think if we can communicate about the importance of insurance, the importance of flood insurance, and whether there's additional insurance or more insurance people can take on to mitigate that risk, I think that would be appreciated. And I do think staff are well aware of how we can better inform residents. What can they do to prep their own homes and properties to mitigate water infiltration or penetration? And there's some recently created bulletins or displays that I think help address that. So I think that's good as well. So I do have a question, but first I want to talk about street sweeping. So we street sweep once a year. We sweep the streets in the spring. We used to sweep the streets in the autumn as well. And I can tell you from walking on the streets in the autumn, all the election campaigns I've done, there's a significant amount of debris on our streets in the autumn that doesn't get collected, leaves in particular. So if we have an early snow and people haven't amassed those leaves, you can see it in the streets now. That contributes to those storm drains being clogged. And so it'd be interesting if staff could get back to us just with a quote. How much does it cost to sweep streets in the spring? What would it cost to do a second round in the fall? And are there targeted wards that we potentially just want to target in the fall. If we have a heavy downpour in the fall, there could be a problem here. So it all came down to budget, but I think that's something we need to be cognizant of. So my question for staff, sorry, that's a lot of commentary as well, but what's the number one takeaway for the city of Ottawa following the August 10th rainstorm that we know significantly impacted 5 wards? If you could boil down what you took away from that and how you want to respond going forward, what's the number one takeaway from the city's perspective?
Thank you, Chair. This is always I can answer this question different ways because the first answer I say is going to make it sound biased towards one thing versus another. But the first thing that comes to mind, the number one takeaway is it was already mentioned. We know historically when we go to a public meeting and we show a map of where we have heard reported flooding, that we get somewhere between another 100% or double. And that's probably a low estimate because that's just the people that showed up. We have ever better information on flood risk and the performance of our system, but this is critical information. And the struggle is that after a flood, especially after August 10th, or I think we have all experienced this, that's a difficult time to start asking people, hey, can you give us this information? You know, where people are hurting, they're in distress. There's a lot of concern and anxiety, and that persists well after the storm. But we've been thinking through this, and we will be coming back in later this year with our recommendations on how we can improve this system. That, for me, that is my number one takeaway. Depending on what you're looking for, we could answer other questions. It's just that I've been looking at and studying our systems for a long time. So where we have vulnerabilities or what type, those weren't the things that surprise me or take away. It's just that there's much we have to do things from a resident perspective, see how they're interfacing with our programs or our requests for information, and try to make that as easy as possible. And not to mention that the residents are not only asking us, or we're not interfacing with residents, but they're interfacing with your offices as well. And there's more we could do there.
Excellent. Thank you. And Chair, I'll just conclude by saying this. A significant volume of water fell in a short period of time. And some people think, the city's infrastructure failed. And I think that's an unfair conclusion. I don't think there was a global failure. But what I'm getting at is, to Councillor Devine's point, is we're going to have storms like this again in the future. So how do we mitigate? How do we learn from August 10th and mitigate going forward? We may not have infrastructure that can absorb such large volumes of water, but what can we do better? And what can we all do to prepare in advance to mitigate impacts on homes, businesses, and other structures? So that's really, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Good comments. Thanks, Councillor Brockington. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to really ask a question based on what staff had noted in terms of the need to raise general awareness about the issue of urban flooding generally, that there isn't a deep understanding about the roles and responsibilities of the city infrastructure, residents. And I think we're hearing that as a clear theme in this debate, whether it was Councillor Kavanaugh, Carr, Devine, or Brockington talking about the need for greater communication with residents about their role, the role of mitigating the impacts of the floods, the role of flood insurance, of having adequate flood insurance, and examining that. It's evident to me that we need better communication products and tools to provide to residents that are very clear in terms of the requirements, especially noting the impact, the increasing impact of climate change. So just in terms of clarity, because I know that Councillor Devine was asking about the usage of social media. I'm just wondering, what do impactful and appropriate communication products look like around urban flooding? And frankly, when can councillors expect these types of communication products to furnish to their residents?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I really believe it is the most important topic that we're kind of working on right now, because talking about urban flooding after a flood is not the appropriate time. We need to have that communication. We need to raise the awareness. We need people to understand what they can do before and what they can do during and what they can do after being impacted by these climate events that we're speaking of. We are working with a lot of partners. That we are not the only municipality. We're not the only group that is working on this type of communication, and we're trying to leverage a lot of those type of communication tools. We really do need a lot of different and multi-pronged tools and approaches. We have some very simplified one-pagers that we have just developed that we can show residents, and it can show some of the things that they can do on a daily basis, all the way to how some of our programs can help support them making incremental changes. I believe we also need to work with insurance boards of Canada and understand what those insurance options are, and make sure that residents are aware from our perspective, raise awareness of those type of products that they can look for as well. So I don't know that there's one individual tool, but the continuous raising awareness. We've also discussed that, prior to you having rain in the forecast, it could be as easy as sending out a couple of tweets about, hey, clear your gutters in preparation for the storm event, or to the catch basin. Oh, and visit our website, or visit this other tool that you can look at, to try to continually reinforce the message and the preparedness for this particular topic, because we do believe it is something that residents do not think about on a frequent basis, and that is something that we are looking forward to trying to changing.
Well, I think all of us around this table appreciate that. I think what we're hearing clearly is the need for more communication tools that provide some level of clarity to residents about the impacts of increasing climate events. I think it is necessary as well in established neighborhoods, as had been noted in the report, older neighborhoods that have not been designed to modern standards will have these issues, and there isn't going to be a quick fix. So I think what's necessary is ensuring that residents know about the potential challenges that they might see with flooding. I know, I experienced this in my role as councillor, talking to residents in one of the streets in the Cummings community in my neighborhood, in my ward, about the challenges that can occur, that streets are flood infrastructure in a sense. But it was evident to me that the residents didn't actually understand the challenges that really confront older infrastructure in older neighborhoods. So I think that we need to do a better job at that. I think that we need to have better communication tools for that, that all members of council can really utilize to better inform their residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor King. And similar to a lot of the other councillors speaking here today, and I'm going to go to you in a second, Councillor Devine, but Heron Park had a huge amount of flooding. A lot of it was the high water table, and it comes up through the floor, right? It comes up through the drain. Sewer backups, we're getting overland flooding, yes, but that can be dealt with. It's the water coming up from underneath and the sewer backups that we're seeing as particularly an issue in my ward anyway. So I've really appreciated your work with residents, but they were literally knocking door to door when this happened. After those floodings, they had huge garbage containers outside because their basements were completely gone. So this is something that it's going to continue to exist in the urban, suburban area, and I know there's rural flooding issues as well. So it's something that I know you're seized with. The residential protective plumbing program right now, with the $5,000 potential for installing some of these preventative measures, I think is good, but it's such, amount of residents that we have and the amount of that are at risk of flooding compared to what has actually been installed, it's pretty low. Rain Ready Ottawa, another, a great program that needs to be made permanent. This is the type of thing that we have these programs in place, but they're not advertised a lot. There's not a lot of funding behind them, and we haven't been able to really, I guess, get them out there across a bunch of communities that need them. So that's my concern, is just expanding what we do really well and then communicating more for how people can access those programs. And I know you're focused on that. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Devine for your second round.
Thank you, Chair, for the indulgence of getting back on. So I just have two final questions. Going back to the city manager's quote, where the city manager referenced the city has a large role to play, and we can do many things. And one thing that we can do is enforce certain measures to prevent flooding from happen. So I know that I've had in one issue in my ward, and Tammy, we've spoken about this, is there are certain parts in my ward where the infill development or just single residents, what they do is they might alter their property in any number of ways. And I have one property that altered their property in 3 ways. They elevated their property, casting water runoff onto the adjacent lot. They got rid of all the grass, and they made the entire front yard a driveway, and therefore losing all the permeability. And just to add insult to injury, they filled in the backyard swale. And so a swale now just hits a wall, flooding over, affects the neighbors. And on any given basis, when any one parcel of land does that, they are cascading impacts on neighbors and therefore on the entire system. And the challenge I had in addressing this issue was things that they should not. I assume we have regulations and bylaws in place that mandate what a property owner can and cannot do. And when I would raise these issues and I say, hey, I think I've caught a bad guy, I don't know what capacity we have to enforce that. I don't know what we have carrots, but I don't know what stick we have to make it clear to any resident that contemplates doing such a thing, let alone having done such a thing, that there will be a price to pay for having done such a thing. So I guess my question is, whether it's how we communicate to residents not to do things to their property that will have negative impacts on their neighbors and therefore the system, or residents who have already done so and may have to follow up and make changes, what tools do we have to clearly be able to enforce rules that I hope we have in place?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. A lot of the issues that the councillor enumerated are actually found in the site alteration bylaw. So we do have our partners with planning, real estate, and economic development. It is on a complaints basis. So as staff, as residents,
started again. Okay, I got the thumbs up. Thank you. So we'll get rolling again. We had Councillor Devine had asked a couple questions and staff were in the middle of answering. I wanted to make sure that
I'll just start all over.
the public had the benefit of hearing. Maybe just get to the question and then we'll get staff to respond.
Basically, I think, during last episode, I think you were about to list off, or you had begun listing off, a series of ideas, initiatives, innovations the city has in place for generally increasing our resilience through absorbency, something to that effect. You were listing off a series of things. I think that's where we were. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the reminder. Get me back up to speed. Yes, one of the things I believe I was mentioning was the retrofit program. This is an existing program, but in the current or the upcoming infrastructure master plan, we will be recommending expansion of that program to other urban watercourses. That is tied really with, in some ways, with the Rain Ready Ottawa program, and there'll be, as you already heard, there'll be something coming forward about a report on recommendations for expansion. I mentioned a few times LID manual, and I was kindly reminded that we use too much jargon. So we are talking about absorbent stormwater management techniques with this manual. This is a manual to help provide guidance for our staff in planning and development review on what to ask from developers for new development. With the manual, it will provide us additional guidance and clarity on, and I hesitate to say standardization because it's not exactly standardization, but some clarity on how to apply these in other situations, non-development situations as well. And I think you were mentioning right away works. So these are all things in motion, and there was already a mention of the province, an act coming up. That was also low impact development, which we could just call green or absorbent stormwater management. So there's a lot of things in play here. We were using the word absorbent. Going back to our presentation, just a reminder that that is one part of the spectrum of the entire stormwater drainage process and system, and it plays an important part. And in a lot of cases, it could play multiple parts. But it's in my mind, as a stormwater or drainage or water resources engineer, I look at that whole spectrum. And when we deal with flooding in extreme events or rainfall for small events, or if we look at water quality in streams, this is a part of that spectrum, but it's not the only one. I sometimes historically, and I'm a little older perhaps, but going back time in industry, the early conversations were it's either green or it's gray, and really the right way to think about it is what are the most effective tools we have in the toolkit and how to properly apply them, and where it ends up being important. If we're putting infiltration techniques below the water table, they're not going to work. So just as one example, but that's not, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. All of this is important.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much for those questions. Great questions around the table, and really appreciate staff's work on this. We look forward to the report coming back to us just based on the discussions we've had. This is a report for information. So can we receive that report for information?
Received.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So we are moving on now to, I believe it's the inquiries that were held and lifted onto the agenda for this meeting. So the first inquiry is on the climate change master plan. Let me just yes, so it's the climate change master plan and budget. That inquiry was held by Councillor Hill. I think there may be a delegation that's asked to speak as well. Okay. So we've got one delegation that wants to speak on this issue. It's William Van Geest from Ecology Ottawa. And then we'll get to, we'll go turn it over to Councillor Hill after that and other councillor members for questions. So you can come on down and speak to this if you'd like. We've already voted.
We did?
Yep.
All right, so you've got 5 minutes for a delegation.
Thanks very much, Chair. You can hear me okay, right?
We can hear you well, and you can go ahead.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much, Chair, for the opportunity to address you today on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. I appreciate this particularly given that the issue before us isn't a motion itself. So I requested to speak today in light of the importance of this issue, that is spending on our climate change master plan. We at Ecology Ottawa found staff's response to the inquiry on the 2023 CCMP spending not only informative, but encouraging. Last year was, of course, the first year funding was earmarked specifically for the CCMP's implementation, for which the mayor and council should be applauded. And so it makes sense to review how we did. So how did we do? Admirably, I think, and I'll highlight a few points in the response that we saw. First of all, the third-party review of greenhouse gas inventories. Solid data, I'm sure you'll agree, is critical to making informed decisions. While this inventory is coming later than we want, it's still very welcome. Pilot projects, like retrofitting the Hintonburg Community Center and the wastewater energy transfer pilot project. Given that the funding earmarked for the CCMP in 2023, which is, of course, $5 million, is inadequate for the plan's full implementation, pilot projects make a lot of sense. They allow us to test approaches or technology to help us better spend funding when more becomes available, whether through council's decision or, of course, from other levels of government. Another point, seeking and applying for funding from other levels of government, of course. This amounts to increasing the overall funding available. And there's also district energy and community heating strategies. As we increasingly face extreme weather events like last year's tornadoes, the flooding last August 10th that we were just talking about, and the wildfire smoke that blanketed our city last summer, it's critical that our energy grid becomes more adaptable and resilient. Also, residential and commercial building performance standards. As you know, buildings are the most significant source of GHG emissions in Ottawa, totaling around 45% of all emissions. Any progress to reduce these emissions is welcome. And given we've committed to building 151,000 new homes by 2031, regulations like the high performance development standards can't come soon enough. I trust this council will cease delaying the adoption of these standards. And last item I'll mention is building capacity. The climate team is converting one temporary position to a permanent, extending 3 temporary positions and hiring 9 new temporary staff. This steady increase means greater effectiveness in implementing the CCMP. I'll stop there for now. But in short, the picture this document paints is of a strategic response to an evolving crisis. Somehow staff was able to divide $5 million among 26 different initiatives. This is not spreading their resources too thin, as some have claimed. Instead, this is admirable thriftiness with a small allotment of funds, and indicates that further investments would be well spent and would have significant impact. If the slices of pie are too small for some, the solution is to enlarge the pie, as we ourselves urged last November when Budget 2024 was being considered. Of course, implementing the CCMP's goals are more urgent than ever. If anything, the effects of climate change seem to be accelerating. February, that is last month, was the hottest month ever recorded, over the 1.5 degree threshold in the Paris Agreement. This past winter was the only one so far in Ottawa where the temperature never dropped below -20 degrees. And Quebec's fire monitoring agency issued fire warnings last week, the earliest in its history. The need to take quick, decisive, and well-founded climate action to benefit all Ottawans is now. And this is what Ottawans want. 1,000 signed our petition last summer for climate action. I trust this committee will continue to support staff's sensible spending of the modest $5 million they've been given to implement the CCMP over the remaining 20 months of its effective horizon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your delegations. Delegation, I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Appreciate you being here. So we're now going to go to questions or comments from committee members for staff. Councillor Hill, you asked that this be raised, so we'll go to you first.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff for providing the response. This is informative. I would agree with our delegate. A number of kind of specific questions I have, and then we'll take it from there. I will dwell on the comment that was made by our delegate about the Hintonburg Community Center. I note that there were $400,000 of retrofit funding spent in the 2023 plan, and it notes that we're using money to match federal funds. Could you confirm how much the federal government is spending on that project?
We received about $630,000 from the federal government for that project.
So that would be approximately $1.3 million to retrofit the Hintonburg Community Center. How will that price tag compare to future retrofits of other community centers? Is the Hintonburg representative of other community centers in terms of features, size, age, et cetera?
Thank you for the question, through you, Chair. We don't want to use the Hintonburg Community Center as a way to extrapolate to other centers, but we are using it as a way to learn from the retrofit that we're doing there. In order for us to figure out what the costs for other retrofits will be for our corporate portfolio, we're doing a net zero pathways study. We expect the results of that study to be ready by the end of Q3 of this year. And that will give council options on how we can move towards net zero targets and what the costs for those different actions would be. Those will then be considered in the asset management plans and long-range financial plans.
Thank you. And I appreciate the robust key performance indicators for the project. Can you speak to what we expect the total estimated energy savings or estimated GHG emission reductions for the project would be?
Yeah. The energy savings are expected to be about 64% annually. We anticipate GHG savings of about 25 tons per year, or about an 80% reduction for the facility. And that doesn't include pending rooftop solar.
No, that's appreciated. I understand that we're changing the name for the waste energy transfer project to the sewer energy exchange system. Could you walk me through the reason for that name change, and how does the new name match with provincial or federal government or other relevant regulation bodies to describe that technology?
Thank you for the question. The reason that we're considering the name change is because there is a proprietary technology which is already described as WET. And so the name that we have started using is Sewage Energy Exchange System. And really that's just to reflect an accurate use of the type of energy or where we're getting that energy from, and to avoid any issues with the trademark language.
Thank you very much. That's good for now, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks very much for those questions. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrea, for being here. And thank you, Councillor Hill, for submitting this inquiry. It was, as the delegate William Van Gies said, it was exciting and very reassuring to see such a detailed and thorough response to that inquiry, because it gave me great confidence in how this annual fund is being spent. I was already supportive of the climate change master plan annual fund, but seeing such a detailed, comprehensive, strategic, and thorough explanation of what it is meant to do and the many areas it is attacking was reassuring. I think comparatively, this modest amount is going to strategically advance not only some very, very tangible improvements like the Hindenburg retrofit, but I think what you are doing with this money, I'm very confident that you are going to be advancing some very necessary strategic initiatives for pilots that are going to serve us in the long run. I wish you well with this annual fund. I only desire to see it sustained and improve. Thank you very much for providing those answers on the KPI indicators that Councillor Hill asked. The 65, I think you said 65% target of, I hope I'm not misquoting you there. I think you said a 65% target of anticipated energy savings and similarly high anticipated GHG reductions. I wish you very well on that. Thank you for striving for greatness, and thank you for the inquiry, Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devine. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chair. And good morning, Andrea. Again, thank you to Councillor Hill for putting this inquiry forward and for the detailed response. Obviously, a lot of staff time went into that. I'm hoping you can walk me through how your group put their plans forward to management and then committee and council as to beef up the staff complement and then how that works into accomplishing the energy evolution plan and then the overall climate change master plan. And I guess from what I'm reading, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but it looks like half of the climate change budget is for staffing and consultants and communications and outreach. So how is that going to impact actually trying to accomplish our goals?
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. The way that we developed the spending plan was using the prioritized list we've been developing and maintaining over the last several years. As you know, this was the first time that we had a dedicated annual fund. And so as you can imagine, there was a backlog from issues that had been identified in previous years. We used the 2023 $5 million allocation to address a number of challenges that were identified in the 2023 Climate Change Master Plan Progress Report. Of those challenges, staff capacity was a significant barrier, and so a significant amount of funding has been used to build capacity not only within the climate change and resiliency team, but also within other teams in the asset management team, the urban forest team, and the forest health team. So we're trying to build capacity within the organization because we recognize that the responsibility and accountabilities are distributed throughout the organization. You also raised the issue of studies. There were a number of questions, such as the one related from Councillor Hill around how are we going to do municipal retrofits on a portfolio scale, for instance. That's one of the studies that's being included in that 2023 spending plan, as is an electricity capacity assessment to better understand what our facilities have in terms of capacity and where future loads may have impact.
Thank you very much. I guess I just want to make sure that we're not staffing up and then leaving the pot bare so we can't actually go out and accomplish some of our goals. So I appreciate you taking the time to come out. Again, very detailed response and looking forward to the work that's going to come out of your team over the next year. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Brown. Councillor Curry is up next. And then I got Councillor Hill on the list again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this. Glad to see this list so that we could actually see what is being spent and how. One of the questions I have is for each of these, is there already prepared outcomes? So not just KPIs, but outcomes so that at the end of after spending this money, we would see an outcome that could be reported on to council?
I'd have to go back to the list as a whole to answer that question. I mean, perhaps as a more general answer, I'll say any of the studies that are being done through the spending plan, the results will be used to inform future work, and those will require council direction or decision in order to implement. For staff, they remain temporary until any council decision or direction is made to change that. And for the pilots, the results of the pilots would come back as part of any future work to inform larger projects or portfolio type projects.
Okay, yes, sorry, I wasn't clear, but I'm talking about like climate outcomes, like some of our outcomes in terms of helping the environment, helping greenhouse gas emission reduction. Are there any outcomes that are expected from the money that will be spent?
Yes, as projects are developed and approved by council, the KPIs and the outcomes are identified as part of that process. And then as part of our annual progress report, we report back on what kind of outcomes we have achieved through those projects or programs based on the resources that have been allocated.
Okay, I guess I will look forward to that. One of the questions I would ask as well, in any of these, do you see any revenue generation opportunities for the city?
There are some revenue generation opportunities to be explored. I think it's too early to say that they could be confirmed. Things like the sewer energy exchange system will make a modest, it represents a modest income potential, though at this point we're looking primarily at cost recovery. Projects related to district energy and renewable natural gas generation also have some revenue generation potential, but again, additional work is required in order to assess that.
Okay. terms of the deep building retrofit, I know you just have Hindenburg on there, but can you talk to me about how much, even just the other one, the electrical capacity assessment, how much work will be done by Hydro Ottawa for these?
We are working closely with Hydro Ottawa on a number of the initiatives. Certainly for the electrical capacity assessment, we are using data from Hydro Ottawa. The study itself will look at what the capacity for almost 120 facilities is, and we'll look at future loads for those facilities, whether it's EV charging, battery charging for small equipment, ice reservicers, et cetera. Converting heat options to things like heat pumps. We'll look at the new loads, and then there's a larger conversation that will be part of that net zero municipal building pathway around how much we're shifting towards net zero buildings, and Hydro Ottawa will be part of those conversations. Other projects like the ZVIP applications would be developed with consultation with Hydro Ottawa, and we're in preliminary discussions with Hydro Ottawa on community heat and district energy.
Okay, so just for me to be quite specific, at our Program and Services Review Committee, Hydro Ottawa came in and talked to us about how they could actually do our deep building retrofits, and it would not be at a cost to the city, and it would be very similar to the award-winning streetlight conversion project. So I'm just wondering, has that started?
I don't have the most recent information on that, but we could get back to you.
All right, because that was one of the things, you know, my understanding was the LED conversion was something the city was not that keen to do originally, and then determined, oh, wow, this is actually a great idea, and came from Hydro Ottawa's urging. This one, the deep building retrofit, seems to be a similar one where I think Hydro Ottawa has been asking for a number of years to go down this road, and the city has been reluctant. So I would just say, given what they continually repeat to us at our service and program review working group meetings, that they're willing to be the entity that does them, I would really like to see a report back on that. And some of the other reports that you've indicated will come to us. Can you just give me an idea of when we would get some of this information?
There's a number of different studies that have been identified. Let me just pull up the list here. The electrical capacity assessment is expected at the end of 2023. The study for assessing the feasibility of net zero municipal buildings is expected also at the end of 2023. The third-party review of our GHG inventories, the preliminary results are expected at the end of this month. Those are a couple of top of mind, Councillor. If there's anything specific that you had a question about, I'd be happy to look at those as well.
Okay, sorry, just the end of 2023. So we're already into 2024. So just so I'm clear, are they already out?
My apologies, end of Q3 2024. Sorry about that, Councillor.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They're not finished. None of the studies that are listed are finished at this point.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Curry. Councillor Hill on your second round.
Thank you. Just a follow-up from Councillor Brown's comment about the volume of investment from this packet that's going towards contracting and staff. Do we have the necessary safeguards and policies in place in the terms and conditions that we create with service providers to ensure that we prevent either the perception of or actual conflict of interest?
Thank you for the question, sir. Through our procurement policies, I believe that we would address those, but I could take that away and double check unless we've got someone from legal that wants to add anything additional to that. No, I'm seeing no.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. In the report, we mentioned the emission performance bylaws twice. With the development of these bylaws requiring nearly $400,000 in spending. Could you speak, please, to what those bylaws would potentially be and who in Ottawa will be impacted by those bylaws?
The bylaws is part of the Better Building Strategy that was approved by Council. It's one of the last steps in the strategy. It starts with benchmarking. That was one of the programs that was recognized this morning as part of the environmental awards. First, it's asking buildings to disclose voluntarily what their energy and emissions are for buildings. Then we have a series of supports to help building owners and operators through education and outreach. Some of the work that is in the spending plan speaks to that. It also speaks to workforce development because really we're working towards market transformation in this. Over time, over a long period of time, building performance standards have been shown to be the most cost-effective and efficient way to reduce emissions and energy in buildings, private sector buildings. And if we follow the trajectory of other municipalities such as Vancouver, Montreal, or Toronto, they tend to have long lead times, 5 years or so, between when councils consider the development of building performance standards and when they start to be implemented. We'd be looking at large buildings over 100,000 square feet to start, then phasing down to 50,000 square feet and perhaps going as low as 10,000. Again, these are all in very long timelines and have not yet been considered by council.
I appreciate that. Do you have a timeline on when you would expect that would come to council?
Not the standards themselves. We're doing the study right now, which is identified in that spending plan to understand what the current energy and emissions profiles are for a range of building archetypes in Ottawa. We're also doing costing studies to try and understand what the impacts are to achieve the energy and emission standards and to figure out what the right thresholds would be. So we would first bring a report on benchmarking and mandatory benchmarking. We don't have a timeline for building performance standards at this stage.
Okay, and when you refer to them as performance standards, you're suggesting that this is a mandatory bylaw across the city, or?
If we follow the trajectory of other municipalities, they first do a voluntary benchmarking program, then a mandatory benchmarking program, then a long timeline in order to prepare the market for mandatory standards. And then those mandatory standards are enacted through a bylaw.
Okay, no, I appreciate the time on this. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Luloff, who hasn't spoken yet, and then back to Councillor Curry on your second round.
Sure, thanks, Chair. When we're working on our emissions inventory, are we looking at gross estimated or net estimated? You know, given the amount of green space in Ottawa, our significant rural tree canopy, our incredible efforts to plant more trees. I think it was 2-to-1 on the LRT corridor, which I think is absolutely incredible. And the greening of our fleet, all of these extra efforts that we've gone through. Are we looking at net estimated emissions or gross estimated emissions?
We're looking at gross estimated emissions. The third-party inventory reviews will look at both our corporate emissions and our community emissions. They use real data sources as opposed to projections. One of the other priorities of the Climate Change Master Plan speaks to carbon sequestration, and that's where we start to look at absorbing of carbon through things like wetlands, through trees, et cetera. Part of our third-party review is looking at the preliminary, kind of the high level, back of the envelope potential based on the green space that we have allocated, but more detailed analysis will be required in order to do the net GHG emissions that you're asking about.
Okay, wonderful. When can we expect that information? Is this going to come at the same time?
The third-party review will have the preliminary results at the end of this month. I do expect that there will be a significant amount of internal discussion because we draw on other departments for the data and because we want to make sure that we've understood and that the third-party consultant has understood how the city is collecting data and reporting on it. The carbon sequestration piece, I don't have a timeline for. We don't know what the next steps of that are until we see the preliminary results of the third-party review.
Okay, given that there's much of the green space in Ottawa is owned and maintained by other orders of government, are we going to be working with them on that carbon sequestration piece as well? I'm sure that they have inventories as well that we'll be able to draw that sort of data from.
Thank you for the question. We are working with other levels of government on aspects of that, such as the green space. We're also working with them on, we're exploring right now what the renewable energy generation potential might be with other levels of government because of the significant federal lands in the area. But there's no memorandums of understanding or formal agreements in place yet to work together. We're still in the exploratory phase.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that we have a clear picture at the end of this, so that we know what our benchmark is and what we can work towards. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Curry.
Thank you. Sorry, I just didn't realize I'd had one more question here. The items that are moving temporary staffing to permanent staffing, can you just tell me a little bit about why that would be necessary instead of keeping them temporary?
Council approved as part of budget 2024, the conversion of 3 temporary staff to permanent staff because they were long-term staff. One of those staff focuses on education and outreach. And as we've heard many times today, there's a significant aspect of education and outreach that deals not only with the climate change file, but supports the work of colleagues in other departments as they themselves are bringing other work forward. One of the other positions is to focus on electric vehicles. As we know, there's a significant growth with electric vehicles, and there had not been any dedicated expertise within the corporation on electric vehicles or electric vehicle charging. And as the city explores the options for the installation of electric vehicle charging, having that expertise in-house has been very useful. And then finally, the last position is to support building retrofits. And we anticipate that there's a significant amount of work both within the corporation and within the community at large to support building retrofits.
Yeah, I understand the important work. I just, why do they have to be permanent instead of temporary?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair, we've had a difficult time attracting and retaining staff with this set of expertise. As you know, it's a competitive market given how quickly things are evolving. There's a competitive market with the private sector, the utility sector, and the public sector because these areas are growing so fast. Part of converting these positions to permanent positions was to recognize that there's a long-term opportunity and benefit. And in order to staff that with the appropriate expertise, we felt it was useful to convert those to permanent positions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Councillor, for your questions. I'll just make a couple comments on this. I think like many city departments, most of it is staffing costs. You see our city budget, the vast majority of that budget is staffing costs, just like we have staffing costs for this team. But I think the thing that I want to, I guess, accentuate to members is that the climate team has done a very good job of leveraging funding with a limited budget. So I'll just give you a couple examples. They leveraged $23 million in private investment for $3 million, just $3 million in loans distributed through the Better Homes loan program. So it's a huge amount of money that comes in just for this small amount that we put into this team. They helped to successfully apply for the $350 million grant from Infrastructure Canada. We heard just today, they applied for and received the $629,000 from Infrastructure Canada to help cover the eligible expenses for that retrofit to Hittenberg Community Center. So I think we're getting a lot of bang for our buck for what we're putting into this very small team. We're obviously scrutinizing today, and I think every department needs to be scrutinized appropriately. But my goodness, are we ever getting a lot back for the work of these employees? So thank you for all you've done and the dedication that you've shown to this city and what's a relatively new area, but obviously a needed area given all the challenges that we're going to face in the future when it comes to climate. You save this city a lot of money, you bring a lot of money into this city, and you mitigate the effects of climate change at the same time. So thank you for all of your work. Appreciate folks' questions today on this item. We're going to move on now to the next item, which is been held, and that's the solid waste of the landfill item. So I know staff are here to answer questions there. Councillor Hill, I believe you held this item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason that I asked the inquiry in the first place was to get an appreciation for global landfill capacity across the city. I understand from the numerous briefings that we've had, the concern that we have about the capacity at Trail Landfill. We've heard on numerous occasions that we have a concern and that that landfill is getting used up and that we have, around 12 to 13-ish years of life expectancy at that landfill. And then we need to be transitioning to something else, be it another landfill, be it some technology or what have you. And we're in the process of having that conversation. And really, what I'm getting at with this inquiry and what I really want to understand is how we are maximizing the total landfill capacity in the Ottawa area so that we can have the most breathing room possible when it comes to our trail landfill resource. Now, I know that we are entering into some agreements over the next few years whereby we're going to be leveraging some of the private landfills in our area. And really the question that I have is, are we maximizing the capacity that we can leverage those landfills in order to squeeze every usable year out of the trail landfill and, you know, buy us as much time as will be necessary for us to make the next step into whatever the next phase of life after trail is? So that's my question.
Good morning. Thank you for the question. So I'm glad that you referenced the curbside collection contract. So through that work, committee and council approved allocating 30,000 tons to the west and 30,000 tons to the east in order to leverage our existing facility as well as leveraging the facilities that are currently in our community. This current year, we're undertaking a lot of change. We're also completing or we've begun an on-street audit in order to understand better what the allocation. So when residents are putting out their waste, are we seeing an increase in the use of recycling and an increase in organics? With that insight, we will have better measures to then update our long-term planning requirements, recognizing that our estimate for the 30,000 was based on data originally from 2018, 2019, as well as projections. So we'll be looking to update that. With that, we'll also be reviewing what is actually on the street in order to see whether or not there are opportunities for us to further leverage. So when we did that initial assessment of the 30,000 in the east and the west, it was based on data that we had collected of our existing curbside contractors who are collecting waste in those areas and where we felt it was beneficial to leverage those facilities. So over the next year, we can be further refining that. And if there are opportunities in order to increase that amount, we can bring that back to committee and council for a recommendation. So very much it was a starting point. I think it positions us appropriately in order to leverage those facilities, as you do say, that are in our community, but always being mindful of the financial and environmental pieces as well. So welcome that opportunity to bring back information as we update those numbers.
Thank you, Shelley. That's my question, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Thank you for being here, Shelley, and staying with us today. Okay, I think that's it for our agenda. It's been a good meeting. I don't think there's any in-camera items. We have 2 information previously distributed items that are on the agenda. Are there any notices of motion for next meeting? Okay, seeing none. Any inquiries? Okay, not seeing any. All right, we're adjourned. So the next meeting will be April 6th, 2024. Looking forward to seeing everyone there. Thanks, everybody.